Chapter 1. June 2070. Henry Jones was waiting at the futuristic Ultraloop terminal in Canberra for his twin brother Harry to arrive. Twin brother was how Henry referred to Harry, in fact, accepted by the rest of the world because they looked so alike. But the description wasn't strictly accurate. The truth, known only to a small circle of close friends and confidants, was that they were closer in nature than the most identical twins in existence. They were, for all intents and purposes, the same person. No DNA test would be able to tell them apart. Harry had originally also been called Henry, and had lived an almost identical life to his counterpart in his early years, as the two of them grew up in parallel universes. It was only after the timelines of the two worlds had divulged into adulthood that their lives had taken different paths. This eventually led to the other Henry crossing over to this Henry's universe to assist during a crisis instigated by Henry's estranged wife, Vanessa. When his universe was destroyed, the second Henry stayed, changing his name to Harry, and the two of them concocted a story that he was his long-lost twin brother. For a world used to this trope, so beloved of soap operas over the decades, it was a relatively easy ruse to pull off. Although they were past retirement age, the pair of them remained as enthusiastic as ever in their pursuit of new scientific discoveries. Despite the incredibly advanced technology of the Ultraloop, which had virtually ended commercial air travel, the world was already talking about the next big thing. So, for the past week, Henry had been attending a conference all about the potential of teleportation. This was something both Henry and Harry, unknown to the wider world, had already dabbled in, and they were curious to find out how far along the rest of the world was in developing the technology. Henry's shock of curly hair was as wild as ever, but had finally lost its red lustre, rapidly greying. Other than that, he made no concessions to his advancing years in the way he dressed, continuing to sport his trademark Hawaiian shirts as he moved into his 70s. Today's offering, featuring parrots and palm trees in a mix of reds and oranges, drew plenty of glances from the passengers alighting from their capsules, arriving en route UA34 from Christchurch. This didn't bother Henry. He had never minded standing out in a crowd. The Ultraloop was a marvel of modern technology, even by futuristic standards of 2070. The stations resembled high-tech versions of the London Underground, with platforms on both sides for incoming and outgoing capsules. Each capsule was compact, seating 12 passengers, with additional space for luggage. They departed every 5 minutes, ensuring a continuous flow of passengers through the network, which spanned the globe. The system was so effective that the capsules could achieve speeds of 6,000 mph. Even accounting for speeding up and slowing down, the journey from Christchurch to Canberra would take no more than 20 minutes. Remarkably, passengers experienced no discomfort from the rapid acceleration and deceleration, thanks to the cutting-edge inertial dampening technology embedded in each capsule. A counterforce to gravity neutralized the effects of the G-forces, ensuring a smooth and comfortable ride regardless of the immense speeds. Passengers felt as though they were gliding effortlessly through the tunnel, oblivious to the intense velocities at which they travelled. They could barely even tell they were moving. The system was incredibly green, powered entirely by the next generation of renewable energy sources. It was amazingly efficient and safe. Run by AI, the capsules whizzed all over the world through millions of miles of tubes, both above and below ground. The network had intersections akin to old railway points, with so many safety protocols built in that the designers proudly boasted it was infallible. Horror predictions by the media of head-on collisions at colossal speeds had thankfully proved unfounded. It was the safest form of transport ever invented. This was why it was so perplexing when Henry scanned the arrivals board for the arrival time of the 12:30 p.m. departure from Christchurch and saw no mention of it. It was a little past 20 to 1, and the 12:20 capsule had just arrived, with the 12:25 due shortly. However, according to the board, the 12:25 would be the final one for the day, Cancellations and delays were virtually unheard of. Such was the sheer reliability of the system. As Henry cast his eyes over the passengers disembarking on the platform, his attention was drawn to something else that seemed odd. The opposite platform for outgoing departures was empty. It seemed no one wanted to go to Christchurch today. And even if there had been any travellers, no capsules were waiting to take them. There were no traditional ticket booths or manned staff at the station. Everything was fully automated. However, there was fully interactive voice-activated AI boards everywhere, so Henry turned to one of them to inquire about Harry's capsule. "Nancy, what happened to the 12:30 capsule from Christchurch?" The AI, activated universally across Australia by that name, responded promptly in a soft feminine voice. "There is no record of a 12:30 capsule from a destination of that name. Please rephrase your question and try again." That was strange, but he did as it asked, trying to be less specific. "When is the next capsule arriving from Christchurch?" Nancy paused before replying. "There is no record of a station on the network called Christchurch. Please try again." This was unprecedented. The AI was foolproof and never made mistakes like this. People took it for granted in the same way they did running water. That's why the safety record of the network was impeccable. No one ever talked anymore about what might happen if the technology were to fail. But if it did, the implications didn't bear thinking about. He looked back up at the board and noticed something else odd. It was displaying that the 12:20 had arrived and that the 12:25 was due in, but the column containing the departure point of both capsules was now blank. "Nancy, where did the 12:20 capsule come from?" "That information is unavailable." "Why is it unavailable? It must have come from somewhere." "I am unable to provide that information at this time." "Okay, so where is the 12:25 coming from?" "That information is unavailable." Henry's concern deepened. The AI's inability to provide this most basic information was not just unusual, it was alarming. If all data regarding Christchurch as the origin point of the capsules had been erased from memory, then the whole system could be on the blink. That could spell bad news for the millions of people around the world in transit right now, if this was not just a temporary local glitch. Although the world in 2070 was a far more peaceful place than it had been when he was growing up, there were still plenty of rogue individuals out there. If they could somehow launch a cyber attack on Nancy, despite the phenomenal level of protection encryption built into the system, the consequences could be devastating. But perhaps he was overthinking it. Then he thought about the empty platform opposite. "Nancy, please tell me, where does route UA34 go to?" "Route UA34 has no destination station." "So what was the point of building it?" "That information is unavailable." "Think about it. What would be the point of building a station with a line that doesn't go anywhere? And if that were the case, where did the people that just got off the 12:20 come from?" "That information is unavailable." "Well, a fat lot of use you are," he said with frustration, stopping short of saying anything worse. There were signs on the wall warning that using abusive language towards Nancy would not be tolerated. Quite how a machine with no feelings could be offended by a few choice remarks eluded him, but posters were all part of the be nice culture that prevailed in the modern world. If the AI couldn't help him, he would have to fall back on traditional methods to figure out what was going on. The next capsule would be arriving any second. Perhaps somebody on board might be able to shed some light on the situation. Assuming it arrived, of course. Thankfully, it did turn up, the sleek white tube gliding silently to a halt, with the eerie high-pitched whining noise they all did on deceleration. The doors hissed open, and the passengers began to disembark, with nothing untoward about their appearance. Reassured for the moment that nothing catastrophic had happened, and that the system was at least still operating, Henry looked over the new arrivals carefully. As he did, he recognised a lady in her 40s who was hauling a large orange holdall out of the carriage. She had been one of his students at the university many years previously, and he had seen her a couple of times at lectures he had given since. "Excuse me, it's Grace, isn't it?" he asked, tentatively approaching her. She had always been a friendly type, and he hoped she would be pleased to see him. And he wasn't disappointed. "Professor Jones!" exclaimed the slim, dark-haired woman, her face full of delight at encountering her old mentor. "How lovely to see you!" "Can I give you a hand with that?" he offered, noting she was struggling a little to manoeuvre the bulky plastic case out onto the platform. "Don't worry, I'm good," she replied, as the case righted itself, allowing her to roll it smoothly out. "Though I really ought to get an automatic case. Having to drag a thing like this around in this day and age is rather old hat, don't you think?" She had a point, thought Henry, as he looked around at the other passengers, their cases trundling along happily behind them under their own steam like faithful ducklings following their mother. By 2070, there was very little in the world that wasn't automated. "Listen, Grace, I'm glad I bumped into you. I'm waiting for my brother who's meant to be on the capsule after yours. But the board over there suggests that this is the last one today, which is a little unusual, don't you think?" "It is a bit," she said. "They normally run around the clock." "Exactly," said Henry. "I tried asking Nancy what was happening, but she didn't seem to understand what I was saying. Did you notice anything unusual at the Christchurch Inn?" "Christchurch?" she asked, a puzzled expression crossing her face. "I didn't come from Christchurch." "You must have done. This is the UA34. It's a direct route. There are no other stops on the line." Grace shook her head. "I'm afraid I don't remember any place called Christchurch. Are you sure you're not mistaken?" "Absolutely not," said Henry. "And how can you not have heard of Christchurch? It's one of the largest cities in New Zealand." "Well, I've never heard of it." "So, if you didn't come from Christchurch, where did you come from?" Grace hesitated as she tried to remember. "Do you know, it's the oddest thing, but I can't seem to recall. It was just another station, I suppose. I mean, it's no big deal, is it?" "Believe me, it is," said Henry. "You can't remember where you boarded the capsule, even though it was only 20 minutes ago. Doesn't that strike you as odd?" Henry scrutinized her as she hesitated, looking closely into her eyes, but they were just empty and vacuous. It didn't seem as if she saw anything untoward in this. He thought about Nancy parroting her line about the information not being available. Now he was dealing with a human mind similarly failing to process the situation and struggling to fabricate a response. "Yeah, well, I guess so. But I guess I'm just a bit tired today. But it doesn't matter where I came from. I'm here now. And that's all that matters." "And the fact you have no idea where you came from doesn't bother you in the slightest? Can you remember anything you've been doing while you've been away on your trip? Where were you this time yesterday? Think, Grace." As he spoke the last two words, somewhat insistently, he got a little too close for comfort, invading her personal space. Despite her past fondness for Henry, the alarm on her face betraying feelings of intimidation, and she began to back away. I need to be going now, Professor. It was lovely seeing you again, and I hope you find your brother soon." And with that, she walked away. Henry watched her retreat, stunned by her nonchalance about the situation. How could she not be concerned about such a glaring memory lapse? He turned back to the information board to see if it had corrected itself. But after the last capsule, there was nothing. He was convinced now that the next capsule would not arrive, and he wouldn't have to wait long to find out. By now, most of the passengers from Grace's capsule were already making their way out of the station. Keen to find out if her amnesia was shared by the rest of the passengers, he approached the last one, an elderly man who was shuffling along with his self-propelled case in his wake. "Excuse me, sir. May I ask you where you boarded the capsule?" The elderly gentleman, immaculately dressed, something which had partly prompted Henry to address him as Sir, looked at him in his flamboyant shirt with a degree of suspicion. "Boarded? Oh, at the last station before here." "And can you tell me the name of that station?" Henry requested, suspecting he would have no more idea than Grace. The man frowned and shrugged. "I'm sorry, I don't recall. It's been a long day, and these stations, well, they all look the same, don't they? Could have been anywhere." There was no point pursuing it any further, so Henry retracted his steps to the middle of the platform and sat down on one of the seats that lined the wall, trying to piece together the puzzle. It was clear that Christchurch had been erased not only from the network, but also from the memories of those who had travelled from there. He was resigned to the fact that Harry wasn't coming, and as he sat there watching the minutes tick by, his fears were confirmed. Less than 10 minutes after Grace's capsule had pulled in, both platforms were completely deserted. It was as if he was in a long-abandoned ghost station. Deciding to investigate further, he got up and wandered back out into the wider concourse, which he was relieved to discover was still bustling. 20 different lines were running in and out of Canberra. These were split into regional, international and local. Around half of these were the direct regional lines, connecting Canberra to the 3 major cities in New Zealand and several in Australia. The local lines, with a top speed of 3,000 mph, were for connecting smaller settlements. Almost every town of any note anywhere in the world had one. Should passengers wish to travel on one of these, having arrived in Canberra on one of the regional lines, they could change and travel on from here. Finally, there were the international lines, which fired the capsules into the global network, where they could be directed anywhere in the world. Even the most distant destinations in Europe were reachable in a couple of hours. As far as Henry could tell, after wandering around several of the other platforms, everything else was running completely normally. Whatever the problem was, it seemed to be originating at the other end of UA34, not here. It would be of enormous help if he could find a human being in position of authority to talk to about all of this, but he knew that would be virtually impossible. These places almost ran themselves. Then an idea struck him, and he returned to the main concourse to test his theory. He approached one of the sleek, touch-screen kiosks in the noisy heart of the station and said, "Nancy, display the map of all regional ultra-loop routes out of Canberra." Instantly, a detailed map of the ultra-loop network appeared, focusing on the oceanic region. Green lines reached out of Canberra, heading for Darwin, Sydney, Brisbane and more. But it was the UA34 he was keen to track, and he was shocked at what he saw when he looked across to New Zealand. There was a large chunk missing out of the South Island, almost as if someone had taken a bite out of it. What was odd was that the missing chunk was curved, as if part of a perfect circle, with the centre somewhere southeast of New Zealand. "Nancy, what's wrong with the map?" he asked. "What's happened to New Zealand?" "I'm sorry, I don't understand the question," said Nancy. "I didn't think you would," said Henry, wishing he had his android Danny, which he had created himself, with him. She was far more sophisticated than this device, which had been built for the dedicated purpose of running the ultraloop. "Can you show me a close-up of the New Zealand network?" he asked. Nancy promptly zoomed in on the neighbouring country. Now he could see things far more clearly. Almost all of the South Island, below Christchurch, was gone. "Has New Zealand's map always looked like this?" he asked, once again receiving an unhelpful response. So he called out to a passing passenger for a second opinion. "Excuse me," he said to the young man in shades and shorts, who looked as if he had just come back from holiday in Bali. "Could I just ask you something? You see this map of New Zealand here? Do you notice anything unusual about it?" "How do you mean?" asked the man. "Nice shirt, by the way." "Thanks. I mean, does this map look normal to you? Is it the shape you'd expect it to be? You don't think perhaps anything is missing?" The young man took a little more than a perfunctory glance before declaring, "Looks fine to me," at which point Henry thanked him and let him go on his way. There was nothing more he could do here, so he headed outside into the fresh, cool air and took an autocab back to his luxurious mansion in Yarralumla. Henry was a wealthy man and had bought this place after retiring from a prodigious career that had combined lecturing with research at one of Canberra's most advanced scientific institutes. Now he divided his time between Australia and the UK, where for many years he had been working with a team of British scientists based at Oxford. They had become more than just colleagues. They were his best friends. Such was the speed and the ease of using the Ultraloop that he was able to pop back and forth across the world several times a year. As for Harry, he lived at the mansion too, or at least had done until his disappearance. Here they had been able to collaborate on their latest projects, free from the prying eyes of colleagues, and what they had been working on just lately had the potential to make even the super-futuristic Ultraloop look as old-fashioned as a horse and cart. Teleportation was the name of the game, based on a variety of technologies. These included the mind-transference techniques they had already perfected, and an adaptation of the time-travel theories that Josh Gardner and his wife had developed at Oxford. Josh's team were very protective of their knowledge, and rightly so, having long ago realised that if everyone knew how to time travel, it would lead to disaster. This wasn't just a prediction. They had seen the consequences firsthand on the few occasions that the technology had fallen into the wrong hands. With the teleportation idea, they were dealing only with the transporting people across space, not time, and had already conducted some rudimentary experiments. They didn't have any long-term commercial plans for it. That was no longer of any interest to them. But if they could create a direct link for instant transport between Oxford and Canberra, that would come in very handy. Henry and Harry had planned to try it out for real after the latter's return from his conference in Christchurch, but it looked as though that was going to have to be put on hold for now. The lab overlooked the property's luxurious gardens, which sloped gradually away to a lake below. Whilst parts of it were fitted with high-tech equipment, as one would expect of such a facility in the late 21st century, it also had the air of a museum about it. It was packed to the rafters with the remnants of his life's work, acquired over many decades. Much of this was devoted to robotics, and it was his finest creation that greeted him as he entered the lab, the latest incarnation of his android companion, Danny. There had been several Dannys, each more sophisticated than the last, and way in advance of anything commercially available on the market. Her AI was the most advanced on Earth, to the extent that she could even simulate emotion indistinguishable from that of a human, and a memory capacity that allowed her to know pretty much everything there was to know about anything. She and her predecessors had been his constant companions now for years, and, in physical and emotional terms, his partners too. This was nothing he was ashamed of. After his disastrous marriage came to an end, he had been wary of a human relationship again, though he had come close at one point. He had been very sweet on one of his friends in England, a lady by the name of Lauren, who ran a pub in a town in Oxfordshire. Ultimately, that had come to nothing, as he eventually lost out to Lauren's new lover, who she had originally fallen for on her travels through the multiverse. He wasn't too fazed by this. Danny and he were good for each other, and he still enjoyed a strong friendship with Lauren. Nancy at the station and the passengers he had spoken to hadn't been able to perceive what was going on. He suspected the same would be the case with Danny, and so it proved, as she didn't recognize anything wrong with the map of the Earth he got her to pull up on the big screen in the lab. The map showed the anomaly, just as he had seen it before, but on a larger and more detailed map. Now he was looking at a three-dimensional depiction of the entire globe, about a metre across, with a chunk the size of a football pitch missing out of the bottom right-hand corner. Danny might not have been able to see it, but she was capable of understanding what was happening if he explained it properly, at which point they could brainstorm the possible cause together, Having already established that everything seemed normal to her, he decided to push her a little further. "Danny, does the shape of the planet look odd to you? I mean, most astronomical objects of any notable size are circular. Why would there be a big part missing like that? I mean, it's in the middle of the ocean, and it's a perfect sphere. Surely it would extend beneath the seabed, allowing the seawater to seep into the magma. How do you explain that?" Danny processed the question and analysed the information in a microsecond, responding instantly. "Henry, I agree it is unusual, but the area you're referring to has always been that shape and size, according to all records and data available." "So New Zealand has always been that shape too? One big island and just a small one beneath it? Is it possible that at one time the land extended further south?" "The continents have changed shape over millions of years due to the movement of tectonic plates, but this area has been stable since humans first mapped it hundreds of years ago. There is no indication of any missing landmass," she replied, her android voice calm and assured. Although he had introduced emotions into her, she tended to remain cool and robotic when it came to the discussion of scientific matters. "Okay, so I'm fascinated to see what you make of what I'm going to say next," he said. "What if I told you that until recently, New Zealand looked like this?" He went over to the touchscreen and sketched a rough outline with his right forefinger of where the rest of the South Island used to be. "Right there," he said, pointing at the edge of the missing area on the map. "There used to be a city called Christchurch." "I would not believe you." "Of course you wouldn't, and nor would anyone else I've spoken to today. But you and I have been through some unbelievable adventures since we got together with the team over at Oxford. You must admit, after all that multiverse stuff, anything is possible." Danny paused, which was unusual for her, as she considered what he had said, before replying. "Yes, Henry, I concede. Anything is theoretically possible." "All right, let's consider a hypothetical situation then. What would happen if half the planet suddenly disappeared? Let's say, for example, that a hole spread across the world until we had something that looked like someone had chopped it in half, right down the middle. How would that affect everything?" "If half the planet were to disappear in the manner you describe, the consequences would be catastrophic. The balance of gravity would be disrupted, likely leading to a destabilization of the Earth's orbit. The atmosphere would be severely affected, causing extreme weather conditions. Sea water would flood into the mantle, causing massive volcanic eruptions and potentially destroying what remains of the Earth's surface." "I think it should have happened already. Let's examine the missing piece we already have, which we will refer to as the anomaly. Can you tell me the radius of it, and where the precise coordinates of the centre lie?" "Certainly. The centre of the anomaly is at 51.75 degrees south by 178.75 degrees east, and has a radius of 622.73 miles. If the anomaly was a perfect sphere, extending below the Earth's surface, then that would place it way below the Earth's crust, right into the mantle. So surely the catastrophic scenario you described a moment ago would have already happened." "If the anomaly were a sphere, that would be true, yes." "Can you confirm that it is a sphere?" "That information is unavailable." "That's a disappointing answer. It makes you sound like Nancy. I thought I designed your responses to be a bit more imaginative than that."
"Okay, well, to put it like a human would, I don't know."
"Hasn't anyone ever gone to have a look? I mean, by flying a plane over it or something?"
"I can't find any reference to anyone ever doing that."
"Right. So what happens if you walk across the boundary?"
"No one has ever done that either. Or if they have never told anyone about it."
"So, what you're saying is, out of the millions of people in New Zealand over thousands of years, no one has ever been curious enough to enter the anomaly and have a look. I mean, humans are a race of explorers. It's inconceivable that they wouldn't want to investigate."
"I'm sorry, Henry," said Danny, who did genuinely seem to regret not being able to answer his questions. That was more like it. He had designed it to be more empathetic, not like the cold, emotionless Nancys of the world. "I wish I could help more." And she placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder as they stood side by side looking at the map.
"It's not your fault," he replied. "Something's wrong with the world, and it seems to be altering the perception of anyone, human or AI, to recognise only the new reality. So far, it seems I'm the only one unaffected. I think it's time we took a closer look. Can you zoom in on the map and adopt photo view? Choose a spot a couple of 100 yards outside the edge of the anomaly, on the land somewhere on the South Island, or what's left of it."
The map zoomed downwards, courtesy of the state-of-the-art tracking system that allowed honing in at high-definition level quality onto almost every public place on the planet's surface. The days of grainy CCTV footage or blurry maps from high above were long over. Some were opposed to this, citing concerns over a surveillance state, which Henry could understand. But the advanced technology was going to come in handy today.
"Focus in on the anomaly and go to street view," said Henry, and the camera shifted. The scene was of a children's playground in a small settlement, somewhere west of where Christchurch had been. It was a sunny day, and he had a clear, full-colour view of a young mother with her back to Henry, who was pushing a child on a swing. It was what she was facing that concerned him. All that could be seen in front of her, across the playground, was a grey, foggy void that, undoubtedly, had to be the edge of the anomaly. The most alarming part was that it was advancing towards her at a fair rate of knots, yet she seemed oblivious to the potential danger. Not that she would have been able to do much even if she had been aware of it, as it looked to Henry as it was moving faster than any human would be able to run. He watched, horrified, as the grey void moved towards her until she pushed the child straight into it. Less than a second later, she was swallowed up too. Neither she nor the child showed any reaction to this at all. It was as if the woman hadn't even been able to see it, or if she had, everything she was seeing had been perfectly normal to her. This fitted in with everything else he had seen so far, but it was still shocking.
"That was horrible," he explained. "What's the matter, Henry?" asked the concerned Danny.
"Did you not see what just happened to that mother and her baby? They were just swallowed up by the anomaly."
"There was no mother and baby."
"So, you don't remember them, even though you were watching the screen with me?" he said, watching her as the anomaly continued to advance towards the camera. "How fast is that thing moving?"
"The anomaly is not moving," replied Danny.
"You can't see it, nor can you remember those two people, because as soon as the anomaly consumes something, it ceases to exist from your perspective. That's why no one can remember Christchurch anymore."
Then another thought struck him.
"Tell me, what is the radius of the anomaly now?"
"The anomaly has a radius of 624.23 miles.
"You said 622 the last time I asked you."
"I assure you, you did not." She replied abruptly, displaying a hint of annoyance. Clearly, being corrected had triggered a negative reaction from her emotion chip. He had never challenged any of her answers before, because he'd never needed to. She was invariably right about everything. Until today.
"Look, Danny, you're going to have to take everything I am saying on trust. You cannot perceive what is going on for reasons I cannot explain yet, but I can assure you it is happening. That anomaly didn't exist until recently, and now it's creeping across the globe. Only I can see it, and by all known laws of physics, it should have caused apocalyptic damage to the planet by now. But that hasn't happened. As far as you, Nancy, and everyone else is concerned, everything seems normal. Why?"
Danny paused, even her advanced AI struggling for an explanation. It is possible that the mass of the missing portion still exists in some form. If the section were somehow sealed off or enveloped in a way beyond our current understanding of physics, the gravitational and atmospheric balance could be maintained. The anomaly might be creating a field or barrier that prevents the catastrophic consequences we would expect. But how could such a barrier or field exist? By any laws we know, it seems impossible. Could it be a neutral phenomenon? Or has someone artificially created this? Danny's green synthetic eyes met his. It is beyond our current scientific understanding. The anomaly could be a manifestation of unknown physical laws or technologies. It might involve dimensions or energies that we have not yet discovered. The fact that neither I nor any other AI or person you have encountered can perceive the changes suggests that the altered reality becomes our normality the instant it happens. Why you alone appear to be immune, I cannot explain.
Yes, well, I've got a theory about that. I'm going to have to get on to the team in Oxford to confirm it. He wondered if Josh and the others had noticed what was happening yet. About 5 years ago, they had become aware that something strange was going to happen in 2070 that would prevent them from travelling in time beyond that year. Since then, they had been waiting and theorising about what that might be. Now, it seemed highly probable that what was happening today had something to do with it. But before he got in touch with Oxford, he still had a couple of questions to ask Danny. Do you have any idea what might happen to anyone consumed by the anomaly? He asked. My lack of perception means any answer I have could not be given with any degree of confidence. If you can see what is happening, you are better placed to answer that question than me. What I've seen doesn't fill me with much hope, he said. The image of the mother pushing the baby into the grey fog etched on his mind. It was leading him to a question he had been putting off until now, but it had to be asked. Do you remember Harry? Looked exactly like me and lived here? I have no memory of anyone named Harry ever living here, she replied. He had suspected that would be the answer, which led him to an almost inevitable conclusion. After everything he'd seen, he couldn't deny it any longer. If that's the case, then I believe Harry is dead.